Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the Empowered Performance Podcast. Today is a special episode. We have a roundtable style episode. These episodes are always super fun because it starts off with a good direction, but then it kind of turns into just the boys chat and then talking shit a little bit and saying some crazy stuff. We'll try to keep it educational as best we can, but if it goes in that direction, I apologize in advance. So we have Ben as my first three-peat podcast guest. For people who've listened before, he actually inspired me to start my podcast. I was a guest on his podcast. I was shaky the first 5 minutes. I hated that idea of like being nervous on his podcast and, the idea of public speaking, even though there's not actually an audience. I just thought about who might hear it, who might say, that was stupid or whatever. And I just thought the best way to get better at that is to start my own podcast. And, Ben is now a three-peat guest. So welcome back, Ben. And then Cody Craig. Is it Dr. Cody Craig?
You could say that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have Dr. Cody Craig, first time on the podcast. Cody, if you don't mind just doing a quick background, how did you get into training? And then what is your current role?
I was a scrawny swimmer way back in the day, and I had a very strength forward high school coach. And as soon as we hit the weight room, I just loved it. And it just kind of took over my life, like per usual, like the classic story. But really what hit the ground for powerlifting and combat sports, I was working as like an assistant strength coach up on a university, and all the strength coaches either powerlift or they do jujitsu. And I just happened to be around both. And so when I finished my swim career, naturally went that direction and just love it. Absolutely loved it. If people want to go watch Ben's podcast when I'm on it, I'll describe my whole situation of how I decided my current career path. But now my goal is just let's cut the BS. Let's get people back to doing what they love to do. And let's get them setting PRs or navigating to the highest tier that they possibly can, despite an injury, despite pain or whatever that might happen. Because I've been there, I've done that. I don't want anyone else to get down that rabbit hole. And that's what led me to my current role as to what I do now.
I like that the current shift, I think, in physical therapy is, and I think it's because of social media, we see a lot more like strength coaches who are learning about physical therapy and physical therapists who are learning about like strength training properly. That like this huge divide of like, 3 sets of 10 banded exercises and some clamshells and bird dogs. And then they just like clear you for like chaos on the field. And then you get hurt again. There's this huge divide. Or you just have like strength coaches that like absolutely obliterate people and don't make like intelligent, changes for somebody if they're injured or like ramp back up gradually. It kind of feels like there's this, it's not even like this huge divide anymore. Almost like some people are a bit of both. So I had like Dr. Katie Dabrowski on the podcast earlier. And to me, she's like just as good a strength coach as anybody, but she's also a doctor of physical therapy. And then you see other strength coaches. Ben, I know you work with a lot of athletes and you've helped them through rehab, even though it's not necessarily like you're charging, through insurance or anything like that. I'm not saying that like you're working outside of your scope, but I do like that this has changed. And I think Cody, a great example of not like babying athletes and like, my business is called Empowered Performance. I want people to see while they're injured what they can do, focus on what they can do, work on it as much as possible, as opposed to I can't do this, so might as well just, get a massage for an hour, get some needling, get all these little things. And then it's like a temporary relief. And then they don't actually get stronger. And then when they get back to whatever they want to do, they're totally unprepared.
100%. That's the biggest downfall is people think that they should feel better. And then that means that they are better. And it's like, there's a huge disconnect between actually feeling better and actually doing better. And it's that middle ground that used to get missed. Fortunately, thankfully, like you said, it's professions are melding, and I think it's for the better, as it should be.
I have a 13-year-old soccer player who's 5 months post-op for ACL, and I'm trying to convince him that like this isn't the most dangerous space. Like the field's actually kind of dangerous. If you just like have this like really weak rehab and you just go back and play, like you can jump up, you can get a knock in the air, you can land wrong, someone can come and like hit your knee from the side, all these different things. But in the weight room, everything can be adjusted, your weight, your volume, your speed, all these different things, your range of motion. And it's just pushing, not so that it's totally pain-free the entire time, not so it's super painful. I like to say like a 4 out of 10 is a good number. And then just seeing how you respond later in the day, the following day, all that stuff. But then just trying to increase his capacity. That's the main thing is, can he just be stronger, even stronger than where he was before he was injured? Because I think that makes him more resilient. But then on the field too, like it might be something as simple as increasing the distance on his acceleration or speed work, or adding some curvilinear stuff or sharper cuts. If we start with like curvilinear stuff, can we go to like zigzag cuts later? And then maybe like 90-degree and 180-degree cuts. But that's the thing I'm trying to tell him is like, we're never going to have a workout where from the before it feels like insanely different. They should always feel very challenging. And, you're not even going to notice a huge shift workout to workout, but from start to finish, you're going to be totally different because we're going to increase the chaos and the intensity and control danger a little bit until you get to the point where you can actually play on the field and, you know, you have two center backs who are going to come and slide tackle you at the same time. And can you withstand that? So if you can speak to how you work with athletes, because I think one of the things that people forget is I'm struggling a little bit to teach them the importance of that. A single leg squat, and I'm like, this is good because it teaches stability and, you know, get range of motion. It can control all the variables. I don't talk like this with them, of course. It's a little too scientific, but it's hard to teach a kid who doesn't care about the weight room at all how important this is for his rehab and for sports. And a lot of this is mental. So he's also in this space where he's like, my knee, or oh, I'm not very good at this. And like, power boards is huge. So how do you help people who don't yet believe in the power of physical therapy or understand how powerful it can be on the mental and emotional side as well?
I like to get into the nuance of the nuance, if that makes sense. My whole thing is like, it's not the power of a profession. It's just the name of what people went to school to do. So it's like a good PT, a good physical therapist, a good chiro, even a good massage therapist, and a good personal trainer. Like if it's one of those like Venn diagrams, majority of that standard diagram should be in all the realms, right? Like we should all have
Hmm.
this like base level. And so it's like, yes, I'm a physical therapist by title, but that by no means does that like hold me into that circle. So it's like just because I give this exercise doesn't mean it's a PT exercise.
Yeah.
Anybody can prescribe it, do that, navigate that. Like it's like there you go. But back to like that original thing, it's like I want them to believe in the actions that we are doing and the actions that they're
Hmm.
putting effort towards. And it's like I
Hmm.
kind of want to I take them a step back and I'm like, what sucks right now? What sucks about your current situation? It's like you got hurt. Why did you get hurt? 70% of the time it's a non-contact, pivot,
Hmm.
turn, for ACL at least. Sorry, my mustache is really annoying me. It's falling forward. Anyway, so it's like you took a weird step, you took a wrong step, and now you're 9 months out of the game. You love to play soccer,
Hmm.
basketball, whatever it might be. And it's like, do you want to take another 9 months out? Do you want to take another year
Hmm.
out before you take before you get back on the field? And it's like a lot of
Hmm.
times they're like juniors or sophomores or freshmen. It's like, you want to go play college? Do you think you stand a chance to go pro if that's your dream? Like that should motivate you, but that's so far away. And it's like, well, do
Hmm.
you want to take another year out from training for your goal? And it's
Hmm.
like the more that we put in here, the quicker, the better off you're gonna be, and hopefully never have to be back in here because that's my goal. I don't ever want to see my athletes back into the gym
Sure.
ever again, as far as
Yeah.
like a rehab standpoint. And
Hmm.
it's like, come on now, like what are you doing? But I want to paint that negative picture in hopes that it's almost like a negative vision board, if you will, like like a negative goal board. And it's like,
Yeah.
look at that, like see this year out, use that as motivation. And when the days are hard, that's when you need to look at that the most because that's when you need to be in here the most, right? So
Yeah.
that's
I
kind of
think
like
there's definitely like, yeah.
yeah.
I
Go
think
ahead.
the whole, like, avoidance mentality, like you're talking about, like, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's like sometimes I do strength work because I was doing jujitsu and I had a 250-pound dude on top of me. I thought, man, if I could bench 250 for reps, this would be a lot easier. So, sometimes like the fear of punishment or negative consequences and trying to avoid that is actually a strong enough motivator as opposed to jump 2 inches higher so I can reach the ball. Sometimes it's like, oh, I'm tired of getting out rebounded and feeling like an idiot. So sometimes that's a better motivator. Ben, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
No, I mean, I think just echoing everything Cody was saying, the one thing I wrote down that you alluded to earlier was like the scope of practice
Mhm.
conversation. And I think that's a useful conversation to have as well when it comes to
Mhm.
like being a strength coach and a trainer. And again, we don't have to spend much time on this because I do think like people like Katie Dabrowski have done a really good job at like laying this out on other podcasts that she's been on. But again, like, just ruling out like clear red flags, like if somebody's having obviously like bladder issues or, bowel movement control issues, like with some sort of a back thing going on, like those are things that are completely out of our scope of practice. But like for somebody that like has, the kind of classic kind of patellar tendinopathy symptoms, that's within our scope of practice to like, help that person like train around that and also like give them some strategies to potentially help them load their tendons and potentially help their tendons heal over time. Where it gets, I think where again, just for me and for Cody, because like, Cody's like doing stuff with my athletes here as well, like with training and rehab. I think where things get tricky is like when they're not with us, or like it's a conversation of like, I might have a conversation with a kid and be like, hey, like the symptoms you're presenting with are kind of like, classic kind of patellar tendinopathy type symptoms. Like, here's what we're gonna do. Okay, you walk in at a 5 or 6 out of 10 pain. We ride the bike for 10 minutes. We do some leg extension isos. We get a little little bit of that like muscular inhibition from the pain and stuff like cooled off, and like get them, a sick kind of a quad pump, and get that analgesic effect from the, from the load that you're putting through their leg and through their knee joint. The tough conversation, and then we can train, we squat, we push, we pull, we hinge, they have a good training session, they walk out in 1 out of 10 pain, but then it's like they're working with a high school, or they're with a high school coach, and they go back to practice, and then it blows up again because they just like, there's no
Connect.
recognition of like volume or intensity in regard to like sport type activities. So I think that's where it can be challenging as a strength coach and a trainer. And that's why like it's nice to have somebody who is a rehab professional in your corner, so you can potentially refer them out and really get like a plan in place. And then there's maybe some communication with like the athlete and the parent. And I'm specifically talking about high school kids here, but like then there's some communication with the athlete, the parent, potentially the coaches, where it's like, okay, like maybe we do need to take, X amount of weeks off of like sport like activity and just, do some general strength training, do some general conditioning. And then we can like slowly get them back into like sport play, and some kind of like, okay, like if this drill is a more intense drill, and I'm just using this as an example, this kind of came up this weekend, like at the conference, but like, instead of the drill, we're doing a 30-yard, maybe we're in a 5 or 10-yard box, and we're just doing some like easier excel, decel type of stuff. But that's like the really challenging part. I mean, and I guess I'm like the one that's on the top of my mind is the kid that Cody and I know that like has had really bad patellar tendinopathy for months. And if I'm being frank, it's just been completely mismanaged. And there was, the kind of like, okay, well, we're going to do PT, and like the PT consists of lateral wall slides and glute activation, band, clamshell, whatever. Just like not actually loading the quads at all. So like obviously not getting the, adaptations that you need for the tendons, and then it's like, okay, well, it hasn't gotten better. And then it's like, we're going to do these injections and we're going to take 10 weeks off. And then like that doesn't do anything either. And then it's like, okay, well, now you can try to return to sport and you blow up again. And so it's just that kind of stuff is like super frustrating for me. And, and then it got to the point, Matt, I don't know if I told you this, but like it got to the point where like it was last week, I think, or the week before last, like where he went and saw the physician again. The physician, the ultimatum was like, you either quit your sport or you just like suffer through the pain. Like there's no way around this. And it's like the evidence on, the patellar tendinopathy is like pretty clear and like pretty out there now. So it's like, anyway, I went on a huge rant there, but like, yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are within our scope of practice. And I almost never, again, unless somebody has been in like a really bad accident or was a full body cast or something, something, like, again, bowel control issues, obviously like cancer and heart, like there's certain things that like you, but like without those like specific kind of cases that I mentioned, like we should always be striving to hit physical activity guidelines, always.
Yeah, there's so many things I could go off with that. One of them was about scope of, no, I love it. Scope of practice, I think, is an important thing to talk about because this is something I struggled with early on. I thought I have to refer out for everything that is even a little bit outside of just training. So I thought if it's nutrition, I thought like maybe I could give a little bit of nutrition guidelines that are general, but if someone wants this side or the other, that's fine. I have to refer out to a super specialized nutritionist, whatever. I don't necessarily have to. A lot of it is just common sense stuff. Same thing with physical therapy. If it's just like managing a little bit of like discomfort or something like that, then you can work around it. You can help people. But if it's like a huge, specific case like you're talking about, yeah, of course, see a specialist. But I almost think of it like within the training context, I'm not a bodybuilding coach. I'm not a powerlifting coach. I'm not an Olympic lifting coach. I'm not a strongman. It doesn't mean I can't learn from all those different modalities. Like I don't do sandbag stuff. It's not like I haven't ripped clean. It's not like I haven't squat, benched, or deadlift. You know what I mean? But if someone's like, I'm prepping for comp, like get me ready. I'm like, you might as well reach out to a specialist if like your goals are that specific, that serious, right? But if you're just, I think of myself as a jack of all trades, master of none. But the rest of that quote is oftentimes better than a master of one, which means that like I think I'm a good initial resource for people. And then if I realize that something's outside of my scope, then I would refer out, whether it's my wife's mental health, but whether it's mental health, physical, emotional health, like nutrition, it could be rehab, all that stuff. The other thing too, is you're talking about the divide kind of being less. I think one of the main things you're talking about, like underloaded rehab, I think one of the best things you can do to determine if you're working with the right rehab professional or the right doctor is, do they train? You know what I mean? Because if they don't, and they're just like super weak and they're deconditioned and they're telling you that you should just give up as opposed to increasing your capacity, the tendinopathy is probably just what he's doing is too much of a demand for what his tendon is capable of in that moment. If you can increase the capacity over time, then that's huge. And you talked about some like Jake Tura sort of protocols, which there's no man better on tendons in the world. Spiel is he's not like Goda. He's not like some of these other guys who's like, if you do our system, you're pain free forever. He'll
Gotta
say,
move like
hey,
a
like,
baby first.
yeah, but he's like, hey, like this might take some time, but like the time's gonna pass no matter what. Put in the effort, and you can actually get some relief. And he's not selling these like quick fixes. And I think that like I dealt with this the other day. One of my clients had knee surgery for an injury. It was a bucket handle tear of the meniscus that he had before we ever started training, and his knee would just pop out sometimes, and then he would just pop it back into place. He would use a inversion table on one leg to pop it back into place. Crazy. And so he could do everything, and then it'd pop out off the most random thing. He'd pop it back into place and fine. And so he finally got it taken care of. And then he's like, man, like my leg still hurts. It's been a couple weeks. I'm like, yeah. And you have to like rehab it, and it's going to hurt, and it's going to take time. And it's going to, but like, I think the setting the correct expectation is the main thing. I kind of did what like Cody was talking about, where it's like, you can do nothing and you're not going to regain a lot of flexion or extension. And extension's actually like the biggest thing, because you're going to keep limping and having difficulty with stairs. You can't straighten your leg out fully. But I was like, until you start working this every day, you could use a bike and just do the bottom half of the pedals to work on your, like the bottom half of the rotation to work on your flexion, and then do a full rotation, then lower the seat height and do all these different things like that's fine. But also he says, I don't want to train my uninjured leg because I don't want it to get so imbalanced for my injured leg. I'm like, cool, let's just let it get as weak as the injured leg. Like we train everything we can, and then we rehab the other thing until it's all caught up, and then you're back to normal, right? So sorry, I
That
don't rant too, but yeah.
not to cut you off, but that was actually a topic of conversation this weekend. And Dr. Megan Graham's presentation, she talked about people not wanting to to train their uninjured side, and she harped on this. Like she made this point like several times when she was on the specific slide that she was on, but she was like, train, like, because hers was on like ACL
Yeah.
reconstruction rehab and stuff. It's like, train the other leg will catch up. Train the other leg. The other leg will eventually catch up. Like,
Yeah.
we need to still, like, again, we're dealing with a human. We got to train the human. And again, Cody can allude to this.
People don't
Yeah.
realize like your body's great at self-organizing, and it's like, yes, there's people that take training one side to a complete extreme, and I think that's a little strange. Like, it's social media, but like, why would you? Example, worked with a guy, labor and repair. This was a guy that was playing in the NFL. So he was like casted here, and he was just like, I need to move. It's like, you don't need to set a 1 rep max single arm dumbbell bench, but just getting something going, there is a crossover effect. You're going to get like a 10-15%. Like they've studied this. You will still show some improvement in muscle mass from not working it and just working the other side. And it's like, that alone should be, to me, motivating enough to just like, yeah, I'm gonna go train. Like, I'm not gonna do anything crazy, and your body's not going to, as long as effort is put in, it's not going to allow the one side to continue to grow unless there's complete, utter nothing nonsense going on the affected side. So it's like, your brain is smarter than you think it is, but it's also dumber than you think it is in other aspects.
Yeah. But at that point, it's a different conversation. If it's like completely not, things aren't firing, and those are completely different things. Again, scope of practice, like that's
And that
Cody's world, and even potentially like Cody may refer out.
I was gonna say, that's where it's like, yes, there needs to be something more specific done, and like that's a specialist would be 100% where to go. It's like that is the case scenario, right?
Going off that a little bit, I was talking about physical therapists or doctors who train, but then I also think strength coaches. There's a lot of strength coaches that are big powerlifting guys or big Olympic lifting guys, and maybe don't have the best mobility, maybe don't have the best speed, they don't have the best conditioning, and there's so many attributes that they don't focus on either. And I hope that it becomes more well-rounded, because yes, strength is the foundation. If you get guys super duper strong, cool, but is it worth taking someone 500-pound squat to 510 if it like beats the shit out of them and then they have a game or something like that? But then they also move really stiff and they're not the most coordinated or athletic. There's so many qualities to train. I think a needs analysis is, what are your strengths? How much do you have to improve on it or maintain it? How much effort do we put there? What's holding you back, or what's the next thing we can work on that elevate your game? If you're 99% of 100% in one capacity and 50% on another, we're going to 60% in that thing with those easy gains make you a better athlete. And that's one of the things where it's like, I like sport coaches that actually play sports. Strength coaches for like athletes that actually play sports, even if it's like pickup, even if it's whatever, just because then they remember, what is this all about? What am I actually physically preparing for? You have to keep the task in mind, and this is definitely one of the topics I want to talk about, is I had it backwards for a long time. We're like, oh, what's the best set and rep scheme? What's the best percentage? Should I use RPE, RAR? Should I use, what should I do? And all that stuff. I was sweating the details so much. Is hammer curl better than a supinated curl, or like easy bar better than bar? I'm like, it's actually so stupid. You can forget about all that jargon and all that knowledge to an extent. It still matters in some instances, and just focus on what is your desired adaptation and what is a really good fucking stimulus. And then the rest kind of takes care of itself. If you rip hammer curls versus easy bar curl, but all you care about is getting huge arms, and you give yourself a great stimulus with both of them, doesn't really matter if it's 4x12 or 3x15, right? Like, it's nonsense, you know?
Well, it's the natural order of social media to like, I'm going to make this great claim and be like super specific because it gathers more attention. And it's like, no, at the end of the day, are you trying hard enough? And are you doing something that's like, yeah, goal dependent? And it's like, I don't need to know what the science bros where they're holding something, intangible, or like the cone, and they're belted to the machine and doing a semi-pronated, reverse curl for the. I'm like, bro, you're 120 pounds soaking wet. If your goal is to be a bodybuilder, you're not doing the right things right now. But like, sure, maybe somebody
Victim
like,
weight.
right, yeah, maybe someone like, I'm trying to think of who, like Phil Heath back in the day. He might be someone that actually has to do something like that because that might be the 1% that is holding him back. But he is the top 0.01% of the 1%, or at time and place. Not when you lack a general foundation.
Yeah, and he's in a sport where you're judged on like every little micro thing in your physique, right? Like
100%.
most of the athletes that that we work with, outside of like Cody does stuff with strength sport athletes. I do not. That goes back to like the thing, like if a strength sport athlete came in here and was like, I want you to coach me for powerlifting, I'd be like, no. Go work with Cody. Like, I have no desire. I don't want to do that. Like, I've never done that myself. And I don't have any experience, and I don't care to coach powerlifters. But like, yeah, I mean, we mostly work, I work with mostly like field and court sport athletes, runners, you guys work with a wide variety of populations, but you guys both, train combat sports and like, have worked with combat athletes. So it's like, none of that stuff really matters. Like like you said, it's the exercises that you can that are going to provide an adequate stimulus so that you can get the desired adaptation. And like most of those things are like, squats, your hinges, your lunges, your upper body pushing things, your upper body pulling things, your sprinting, your plyos, your high speed change of direction and agility type stuff, like that's, and then playing the sport, doing the thing, like this, doing the specific thing. So like Q really harped on this weekend during his presentation, and I feel extremely strongly about this. In the weight room and in the gym and in the training environment, like you're training the human physiological traits. Like you're training the muscular system, you're training the nervous system. Like those are the things that we need to be focused on. Not like, what the optimal setup for like biceps curls. Like just pick one that you like and do it. Like, and do it progressively,
So there's this thing that I want to admit that like I feel like I'm changing my mind on something. One of it is like Marv Marinovich, his training. I just saw some clips and I was like, okay, for Choi Palmel it works, but like if he believes this works for everybody, I think it's kind of dumb because he's missing out on like the general stuff. And I kind of came to the conclusion that like special exercises work for special athletes. Most people are not special athletes. Most people are not in that top 1%. They're not maxed out on the main stuff, where the only separating factor between them and the competition is that small little extra degree. And then I looked into his like concepts a little bit more. I'm not saying I'm all Marinovich now, but he actually like was very general with general athletes, GPP for general people, right? That's a pretty simple thing. And then he started doing that special stuff with people like Troy Palmel. But did Troy really need to do your typical like squats and chin-ups and all that stuff and just try to get as heavy as possible? Maybe a little bit for maintenance is cool. But like he's Samoan playing like football. Like he's won the lottery, and then he also is like super strong and jacked and all that stuff. And like, is it worth, like we're talking about 500 pounds going to 510, getting folded by a bar on like a night where you didn't have good sleep going into like a weekend game or something like that? No, but if it's like improving the speed and the coordination and focusing on the nervous system a little bit more, because your hardware, I like to say physiological is hardware and nervous system is software. If your hardware is like tapped out, then yeah, it makes sense to focus on all these like fast twitchy kind of things.
Yeah, and it's really like once you're at that level and you're Troy Polamalu, you're like a freak. It's not like you don't need that much of a stimulus to maintain muscle mass and maintain strength. Like it's so like you can probably get away with more fast type train, whatever like you want to classify the Marinovich stuff as, you know what I mean? But did it work? Yeah, but like, did it work because it's fucking Troy Polamalu more than anything?
Yeah.
Probably, I would argue yes. And also, again, I don't know when he started working with Marinovich, but like Troy Polamalu, where did he play? Where did he play college football?
USC?
Okay, yeah. So he played at the University of Southern California, and then he played high school football, and he probably had a high school, like they probably did bigger, faster, stronger type stuff in high school. And then he got to the University of Southern California where they were probably clanging and banging, son. So like, what are we talking about? Like you got a genetic freak, and he has like giant background of quote unquote traditional training. And then it's like, yeah, okay, like you can do like the Marinovich stuff now because like his base is so like Troy Polamalu wasn't taking weeks off training ever. So it's like he was always getting a consistent stimulus.
Yeah, for
His
sure.
base is a foundation. Like it's truly like platinum laid concrete for a skyscraper, and it's already 100 stories tall, right? He doesn't, and we know this, like maintenance stuff is very low. Like you actually don't need much for maintenance on anything, or like, when it comes to like a strength aspect. And it's like, he's good. Trust me. He can go do the special stuff. He's gonna whoop my ass any day of the week in anything ever. It's like, yeah, he's good.
I thought he was a nice guy because I was a scary dude.
Yes. Yeah.
Bro,
I'd be terrified.
what a dog.
Kind of going along those lines, another thing that I've changed my mind on a bit recently as well, and I'm curious how you guys feel about it, is that with athletes, I would get a little bit more movement variability because I thought you do need to have that wide base that we're talking about. But then with some of my like, 40, 50, 60-year-old clients and all that stuff, I was thinking just giving them a more traditional like strength and conditioning type of model and all that stuff. And yeah, I would dose a little bit of mobility and power and all like that kind of stuff. But I don't think I did enough coordination stuff. And like some of them hate doing cardio whatsoever, but they have a heavy bag. And just doing some rounds on the heavy bag is so like exciting to them that they get to like focus on skill work. They get to focus on coordination, balance, rhythm, all these different things. And like their intent and their enjoyment is like through the roof when they get to that. When normally if it's just like, I don't know, the fan bike or the rower, they just be, and they just kind of go through the motions until it's done. I definitely think there's value in enjoyment, but then also it's like at any age you can do athletic things. You just have to find that entry point. So like you were talking about self-organization earlier, Cody. I have one of my clients who maybe hasn't jumped in 20, 30 years, just doing pogos forward and backwards over a line. And just to see how he has to like organize his body underneath himself, even with just like moving forward and backwards 2 inches is tremendous. But I just think about, the next time he has a situation, he plays pickleball or something like that. But what if he has like a trip or fall? Would he be better prepared if he does sort of like, a lot of movement variety or like balancing on one leg and throwing a tennis ball back and forth? You see Steve White do a lot of tennis ball stuff. So it's like, it's definitely something I've been thinking about a lot is that style that you see with Austin Yoakum's a great example. He might have the main amount of like the workout to be very specific. We're going to do squats and deadlifts and chin-ups today or whatever, who cares? But then maybe that first 15, 20 minutes is so playful and so variable. And it's not the same thing session to session. I also feel jazzed up about it too, because I think coaches will sometimes chop and change programs too much as opposed to sticking with an exercise for long enough that they can get huge gains out of that exercise. But I feel like if I give myself 10 minutes at the beginning of the session to be creative, then I feel less of an urge to chop and change month to month, their actual main basic stuff that they should be doing anyway to get gains. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that.
I mean, Ben will have his people, do spike ball for like a warm up. And like,
Yeah.
that's controlled chaos right there. Back when I was at University of Findlay, like we'd go play racquetball. Like that can be kind of, similar aspect. It's a little controlled chaos. And as long as you're not trying to kill the other person, it's relatively safe, to a degree. And it's like back when I was in the clinic, you'd be surprised. Like, I get a 16-year-old that's like getting recruited by IU for football or something like that. Forget the kid's name. But like post-op, I forget what he had, MCL or ACL, something like that. Getting him to do a line drill, I'm like, you're a monster athlete. Why is this so hard? It was like literally watching a giraffe walk like for the first time. And I was just like, something's missing in this situation. And if you're on the field and you have to know your footwork, you have to know where your body's at in space. Sometimes it's just like, let's just go do something that requires that. It doesn't have to be specific sets, reps, drills like you were saying, but just exposure, enjoyment, maybe a little bit more intensity. It's like, Boom.
Yeah, Ben, what do you think about that?
It's dope. I think like and to like the space that like Yoakum has a lot of turf space and stuff. So like and if I not that I really want any more space, but like if I had more turf space and stuff like ultimate frisbee, like freeze tag type things like that's the more even more room for spike ball and stuff like that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of stuff's great. I think if it's only like that, you're only doing like the like chaotic type stuff, and you're not doing like again, just like the more you layer on complexity, obviously, like intensity comes down. So like, I think there has to be a balance of that. But again, I think like within your sessions, I think if you have again that for like 10 or 15 minutes of doing things that are more chaotic, that are more reactive, and again just like with like different agility drills and stuff like that, like with again, I'll just use the high school athlete example. Like if you're just doing like cone drills and stuff, like that's not like kids don't really like, it's not fun, it's not like enjoyable. So like there's that enjoyment factor too, where you want kids to like compete and like have some fun. So like even like the agility games and some of the speed stuff that I try to come up with for the kids is like reactive and competitive, and I try to make it fun. So it's not just monotonous and super boring. So again, I think there's a time to do like some of that stuff, and I think then there's a time to like do more stuff that's I would say less complex. Like, yeah, I think all that stuff. I think all that stuff is really good, man.
I think if the goal is like a huge physiological adaptation, we need a huge stimulus. Yeah, you're right. You don't need complexity. You don't need to do like a reverse banded squat on a boasted ball with bamboo bar, something like that. Just fucking squat.
Never, don't ever do that. Just don't. That's not. Yeah, I don't think that's a
There's a
worthwhile.
bander to your side of your head and someone's pulling it and you have to close your
Yeah.
eyes.
Yeah, or you saw the stability ball hitting the NFL guy doing deadlifts. You do like a
Oh
pause.
my god, dude. And like some of that stuff, and again, like some of that stuff, people talk about like not to cut you off, Matt, but like
Yeah,
people talk about safety,
Mhm.
in the gym and safety with training. Like, and again, like we could talk about this, but like strength training and like doing like, and again, like we see some silly things and people loading things too quickly and, not understanding load management and, capacity and tolerance, whatever. But like good quality strength training, teaching people, how to squat and how to hinge and, single, like is relatively safe.
Mhm.
Like, but like, with some of the stuff you're describing, like some of the things that we see on the internet, like some of that stuff, it's like, dude, like if this guy like loses his balance and twists his ankle, like this guy's worth fucking, whatever, $120 million or whatever. I don't even know what the salary, but like the guy's worth $80 million. And it's like, what are we doing? Like
Mhm.
if he injures himself in the weight room doing something silly like that, like that's on you. Like
Yeah.
for programming silly exercises that are like more complex and not stimulating anyway. Like it's not, the juice ain't worth the squeeze, man.
Maybe the dumbest thing I've seen recently was that I think it's like Bademba or something like that. I think it's in Belgium or something. He had a woman doing tantrums from a push-up position on bands while she was doing push-ups, lowering her face into a bucket of water because I think she was a swimmer.
Bro, I saw.
Oh God, I was like, what are we doing? You know?
What are we doing? What
Yeah.
are we doing?
So let's go in a slightly different direction because I can go down that rabbit hole forever. We have all had some experience in contact or combat sports and football. Big hits. It's definitely like a huge thing. And then Cody, jiu-jitsu for you. Me, I got into jiu-jitsu about a year and a half ago. I've done a little bit of MMA, Muay Thai, that kind of stuff. Right off the bat, why should people get into something like that? People say it's dangerous, but what are the benefits? What are the reasons why you should actually try something like that? Either of you guys can pick this one up.
Go ahead, Cody.
My personal reasoning is I think it's always like we talked about this earlier. It's good to have a background or a basis of just moving your body in a somewhat chaos manner. Like the weight room's great, but that's meant to
Mhm.
supplement things that you do in your life. I think everyone should have a physical hobby. So I think that's
Mhm.
just a good point of being a human being, and what keeps us younger or stops us from
Mhm.
aging as fast, maybe is a better word. I choose combat sports or like jujitsu simply because I find it fun, enjoyable, and I think it is, in a way, it could be a useful skill. I'd rather be a warrior in a garden and learn how to garden than be a gardener in a war and have to learn war, right? One is going to be much slower and gives me time, but then I'm always prepared for something, whatever that might be. I'm not saying anything crazy, but I just think it's good to know how to handle your own body in a situation where someone else might be involved. And I find it fun and I can compete in it. And it is a good like aggressor energy wise, but it shows you how to use that aggression in a smarter way. And I'm very analytical. I'm not a quick to negatively react with aggression most of the time. So it is good for me to heighten my what's that bell curve like excitement. It's a inverted.
Oh, arousal.
Yes, it's like your level of stimulus. It's a little bit different for everyone. It's definitely on that lower end, but if I can learn how to manipulate that, that just makes me a better person. I think,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That's my 2 cents.
I'll answer that actually really quick is, one, you're talking about it's fun. I think it's fun when it's going well, and I think it's the worst thing ever when it's not going well. And I was telling you before we started the podcast that I rolled with a Brazilian coach recently, black belt, barely speaks any English. And jujitsu is the weirdest thing because you can be nice to your partner and mean to your partner at the same time. And like a rhino, he puts his forehead underneath my jaw from side control and starts twisting my neck until I feel it pop. And I'm like in so much like pain in the moment. I'm not going to tap from pressure. Like that's my biggest goal is to never tap from pressure. If it's a joint lock, sure, but if it's just like a knee on belly or something like that, I don't want to tap. And like I was in so much pain that instinctually I was like fighting, gouging his eyes because it was so painful. And then he like looks at me and he like smiles and he's like, sorry, sorry, and they like fixes my hair and then start kicking my ass again. I'm like,
Straightens out your compression shirt. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, man."
yeah, he just like lines it up and oh man, it was terrible. But then yeah, like one of the reasons why like I do it is because it's so easy to not do difficult things in life, and I find that it makes me a better person. And also, getting my ass whooped makes me talk shit a little bit less. I think that's an important thing too. You run your mouth less when you get man. There's this one guy. It was such a humbling experience. He's probably like 5'8", 140 pounds, and they called him Leg Lock Joe. And he was a purple belt, and he was in a no-gi too. This dude would never stand up. He'd start seated. I know you wouldn't do that in the streets, but he was like a bow constrictor. You just wrap around your leg, every leg lock you wanted, whatever. He embarrassed me one time because my first time doing gi, my belt came off and I was putting it back on during the round. He's like, just leave it off to the side. I was like, oh no, I'll do it quickly. And then he grabs me by the belt and like slams me to the mat. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, I thought to myself, it's like, man, I thought I could like on the streets if I ever came across like some middle-aged IT guy. And scary. I don't know who else is this scary. So like, it's definitely a humbling thing in that aspect too. But yeah, and I also, you're talking about aggression and like being able to ramp up and ramp down. I had this thing where I was like, I want to be a nice training partner forever. But then I had that like cross face that like almost killed me and like knee on belly that was like crushing the wind out of me. I was like, maybe I should add a little bit of this, maybe fix people's hair while I'm doing it. And that's the balance. But anyway, Ben, do you want to speak about like, why is it good to get trucked or to truck somebody every now and then?
Well, I mean, I have like very similar experiences with not only my jujitsu experiences, but yeah, football experiences as well, man. Like I was a big kid growing up, but I was a very soft kid. Like when I first started playing football, I was like 5 going on 6 when I first started playing football. And there were kids that played like the year before, and some of those kids like one of my really good friends growing up, really good friends in high school, played football at Eastern Kentucky University, was a fucking dog, like right out of the gate, like, and wanted to hit people, wanted to lay you out. And I remember like football practice, like when we were, 5 or 6, like we would just line up from across each other and just smash into each other. I mean, this is football in 2001 or 2002. Like this is what it was, youth football. But dude, like just the amount of time, I mean, just purely the amount of times between the age of, 5 or 6 and 21 that I got laid out. Like I have a specific story. So my sophomore year of high school, I was a starter on our varsity team, and I went to a big high school, like a 6A school in the state of Kentucky. And like these kids that were seniors that year had played in a state championship when I was a 8th grader when they were sophomores. So like I was like mind blown to just be in the huddle with like the quarterback that played in a state championship and like all these guys, my cousin being one of them, like on the defensive side of the ball, who like ended up being the all-time leading tackler at the school. But this kid, his name was Sage. He was playing safety during our we would do like a midnight madness type of deal. So like our first practice, like on the first night that we were able to practice, we would practice under the lights, like, and the community would come, and it was sick, right? And like there was a bunch of hype around the team, obviously, like that year. So like I'm nervous, super nervous. Like this is my first like, you know, kind of like real varsity experience. And we're going up against our defense, like a bunch of seniors, on that defense. There was only one sophomore on the defense, and my good friend Swanee. Anyway, I'm running down the middle of the field, like under the lights. Like there's, you know, the crowd, like people are in the crowd. Like I'm running down the field, and like the plays on the other side. Sage was playing safety, and he just comes out of nowhere and just blindsides me. Fucking doof, like chin, like crown of his helmet, like on my chin, like my body felt like it was like this way, like my feet were up like this way, like laid me out. And I mean, I don't know, 245 or 250 at the time, and he's maybe a $170 soaking wet, but like love to get downhill and love to make big plays, love to hit people. And like I just remember him, like I remember like looking up, and he's like looking down at me, like sticks his hand out and picks me up. But again, like just like stuff like that. I mean, it's just that yeah, it quite literally like and in jiu-jitsu, like I'm rolling with like guys, you know, kids that are like, you know, high schoolers or in their early 20s that like have wrestling backgrounds, and like that's something we've talked about before, Matt. It's just like they have an upper hand, like it, and like it's quite humbling when you you know, when you get you know, kind of tossed around by a guy who's 180 pounds and, you know, just is, you know, is a savage on the mats. So yeah, I think doing hard physical things is important. I think to allude to Cody's point, like any kind of like sport or like sporting like activity, or even just training, you know, consistently training, you know, and having a movement practice is really important, you know, obviously for like the physiological qualities, you know, your mental health, keeping you humble, you know, like me and Jake this weekend played 2 hours of basketball with some kids and like got our butts kicked every time, you know, it's like, oh, well, like that was that. But the ability to be able to just do things, you know, with your body is important.
I think it builds a bit of confidence too if you can like give a hit or take a hit for whatever reason. You know, it's like you know, there's that one kid in PE who's scared of a ball. You know, and they're like flinching and all that stuff. And I think it just gives you some confidence. Same with like the whole jujitsu thing is like, I think when I see how a white belt can't do anything to a black belt and like how comfortable they are in those moments, and they can choose to either go as fast and hard as they want, or they can just, this is the biggest difference I've noticed between like purple belts, brown belts, and then like black belts, is a black belt doesn't have to put any effort in. They'll just block you. And then there's going to be this like standstill, and then they're just going to wait for you to do something and then take the space that you gave them. So they can just like be so patient, as opposed to purple belt will have all the skills, but they'll just fly through everything, right? The black belt will like take their time. And it's not every black belt, of course, but like when I just think about how much confidence it must give them to be able to have this like superpower, it's huge. And then you're also talking about like, you know, these like youngsters who are like um, you know, maybe like a lot later than you and something like that. I had my first like scary experience with like a youngster because I was like, oh, I at least have like grown up strength and a little bit of like size on them or something like that. And this one kid was probably 17, hadn't seen him for a year. He's 18, and now he's like whooping people in the gyms and giving everybody hard rounds. And he's like the new man on campus. And all it took is like one growth spurt, huge surge of testosterone. The dude put on a little bit of muscle and all that stuff. And the thing that, and Cody, correct me if I'm wrong, it usually takes about 10 years to get a black belt, which I think is the longest in combat sports. But then like juniors can't get black belts. They can't get, I think, higher than a blue. So if you start when you're 6 and you get to 18, you have 12 years of experience, and it's the most natural thing for you because you've been doing it since you can remember. And then you get that like, you have youth, so you have energy, but then you get your first like grown man kind of like growth spurt. That 18-year-old blue belt is scary, you know? And so that's just like, and I just think about like, it's such a wonderful thing for confidence. I just had a kid 2 months ago, and I want to put him in it just so it's like, I was a small kid, I was bullied, I couldn't really defend myself the best, and I was angry because of it. But if he can defend himself, maybe he can be calmer, happier, stand up for his friends growing up, and maybe he has a better childhood just based off that alone. So
It's like built-in confidence for life. Like
sure.
you get these situations, maybe it's not a physical situation, but like, you know, God forbid, but like a financial situation comes up and it's like, well, you're facing adversity, you're not going to panic, you're going to have a plan. And you know to stick to the plan, and you know how to navigate the plan calmly.
Yeah, and I mean, not to cut you off, Cody, but I also think that like jujitsu, football, football and combat sports are completely different. But it does, like you alluded to this, Matt. It does give you, it's humbling. You know, like you get humbled in like sports that are physical, and I think that's just like good for life because there are so many there are so many men, you know, like you go out to bars and like there's so many men that like run their fucking mouth
Mhm.
and talk shit and want to like fight and like do that kind of stuff. And it's really it's more often than not that person, like it's never the person that like has done jujitsu or has played, you know, has played a lot of football, because like you've been humbled before, like, you know, like it's like, "Man, I'm not gonna mess with people." Like the only time like I'm ever gonna intervene is when like
Yeah,
somebody is
self-defense.
bingo.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah. Unless you're Sean Strickland and then he just picks fights with everybody all the time, but he's wired different, so
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and like I said, that I feel like that's an N of one, man. Like
Yeah, yeah, of course.
how many guys are in the UFC that like go around picking fights with people? Like that's
Sure.
not, it's not.
We have a new guest on the podcast. What is this?
Zeke. He's getting a little barky, so I'm making sure he doesn't.
Oh, no worries.
Zeke. This is Zeke.
That's Coach Zeke.
This
Coach
is
Z.
this is assistant coach Zeke here, named after Ezekiel Elliott. If
Oh, that's
anyone's an
awesome.
OSU fan.
That's awesome. All right, so going in a slightly different direction, we talked about one thing kind of organically, we were just talking about what good rehab really is, but there's two things that I really wanted to get into. One of them was what makes a good coach versus a bad coach, and then when we're done with that, what makes a good client versus a bad client. I don't think this gets discussed enough, and I think people go in and they expect the skill of the coach determines the success of the client, not realizing that coaches to me are like guides or like Sherpas. Now you have a starting point and end destination. We kind of help you along the way. We can't make you actually do the work that you have to do, and then we can only help you while we're with you. If I'm with somebody 3 hours a week, the other 165 hours, they can be like terribly unproductive and like undo a lot of good work. So like, what does it take to be successful as a client? And I try to tell people this all the time, but I'm just curious your thoughts on both of you guys on let's start with what makes a good client and then we can talk about what makes a good coach.
A good client first.
Yeah.
Okay. I would say, well, I guess setting realistic expectations for the client would be
Mhm.
like a good first thing. I know that's not, I know that's kind of like, I guess more on the
Coach.
side of what makes a good coach, but like making sure that they have like realistic expectations. I think the biggest thing from a client or athlete perspective that you're working with, again, is just like consistent effort.
Mhm.
Like the big thing is like consistency, just
Mhm.
consistently like showing up, like again, the kind of like bare minimum, physical activity guideline type things, trying to like just be consistent with those things, I guess would be the biggest thing. You know, trying to make sure that you're setting up an environment. I guess I keep relating it back to what a good coach, but like trying to make sure that you're setting up an environment where they're comfortable enough to like communicate with you.
Mhm.
You know, if things don't feel right, or if they're not liking certain exercises or certain things that you're doing in their programming or whatever like that. Like I think communication is important both ways. Yeah, I don't know if Cody has anything to add like on what a good client,
Well,
kind of
so
looks like.
I guess maybe I'll phrase it a little differently. You've had we've all had this where you have some clients that are very successful, and they did everything right, everything that you asked of them, they were just like amazing. And then some that weren't very successful. And what do you think was the difference between the ones who were successful and weren't very successful? Because like you didn't change that much as a coach in those situations. You have some people like you're talking about consistent effort. Maybe they did the homework that you assigned them or something like that, if that's the thing. But the same thing as like a student and a teacher. It's like what makes a better student, right? So from your experiences, how about we just say like you can maybe just compare your best clients without naming names, of course, to like your worst clients and how would they be different, I guess?
My best clients just always show up for themselves. I mean, point blank, like they're ready to whatever their goal is or goal set is, they're like ready to. I think the word would be identity.
Okay, that's good.
Like
Yeah.
they really like if we're talking, especially if we're talking about like clients, personal training clients, adults, they're really ready to make like an identity change.
Mhm.
The ones that I've worked with that truly want to change their behavior, that truly want to change their behaviors, that they want to change their identity, and that only like that happens through like consistent action, and also again coming back to like coaching side of things, but like from a coaching perspective, like making sure that they are getting some wins like early on, whether that is just like they're
Sure.
getting a little stronger on an exercise, moving a little better, maybe they're sleeping a little better. Obviously those kind of like early hormonal changes that you see from like
Yeah.
exercise acutely, they feel good when they leave the door. It's kind of like the thing that they're maybe looking forward to. And again, maybe it's even less just about like the training stimulus itself, which like that's important, but like maybe they just like coming to hang out with you couple times a week. You know what I mean? And like they like the conversations, and you're not like a robot AI trainer. Like you're like an actual person. So yeah, I know I kind of went all over the place there. Cody can speak to this as well.
It's funny you say the AI thing. I've talked to Ben about you talk about your difficult clients more than you talk about your more successful ones most often. So Ben has heard a rather difficult one, but my more successful ones, again, I have like clear examples in my head. It's like, how do I want to say it? It's not like an ego check, but they stay curious and they're willing to communicate and collaborate on what the goal or situation is. So they're not going to like, they'll ask me a question and it's like, if I'm pretty confident, I'm just gonna like say it. But then there's like, oh, they have more questions. They're not afraid to ask the question. And then maybe I'll get more information that way. And then I get a better layout versus like maybe the least successful ones. I don't want to say we all have our egos. I certainly do. But it's like with that AI situation, they're like, well, I have this tool in my hand and they're going to take it as gospel, if you will. And it's like, they'll ask a question, but then it's like, they don't believe you or they're going to question it thinking that they know more. And then they're like, well, I'm going to Google this. And they go find something that's a cherry picked data, which again, we're all susceptible to. But like with this AI stuff, and then it just hallucinates or it gives them something that appeases them. And then you're fighting literally a bottomless pit of despair at the end of the day versus again, like I've had people compete on an online platform, not even an in-person one at nationals, at a world like stage and powerlifting and jujitsu. And it's like, what do they do best? They make sure I know everything that's going on that might affect training. They stay curious, they ask questions. And then my job is to also try to check my own ego, ask more questions to see where their headspace is at. And sometimes that comes natural. Like you connect better with certain clients just because maybe you have personality traits that match well together and you have a friendship with them. And that almost makes it a more successful relationship. And it's like the better you communicate, the better that you're on the same page as who you're working with, both directions. It's a two-way street. The more successful you're going to be because there's going to be less traffic jams, right? So
Yeah, I definitely want to speak to that because there's something like early on when you're like a young ambitious kid, you say like, oh, I want to be the best trainer, and like it's not always better or worse than like the next guy. It's just about better fit with a certain client, and that's why there's training is such a huge space, and there's so many things, and yeah, you can learn a bit of everything. But then, like I was saying, like if you're a specialist, then you're perfect for the special athletes. If you're a generalist, you're best for the general athletes. You're not going to be the best for a specialist here, a specialist there, and then all the generalists in the middle. Like it's just I think it's unrealistic to say that you can be the best for every single person in all circumstances. It's definitely something I've worked on. Ben, you talked about identity. In my own uh like questionnaires, when I do like the initial consultations with clients and all that stuff, I've definitely focused on with the goal setting. The most important question is not what is your goal, the question is why. And I think that sometimes people set goals and they think that it will help them with what they really want to achieve, the deeper, and it might not. So someone might say like, oh, I want a six pack. And I maybe, I think I've said this before, but like I had a client who like, lost 80 pounds, got a six pack and all that stuff and bicep veins, and his life was transformed. But the thing that made him happiest wasn't the six pack or the bicep veins. His wife even thought like, oh, I like you better when you're huskier. He like makes that comment sometimes, but it was just that he's like, man, I can play sports with my kids. Like I feel great and I get out of bed and I'm energized and all that stuff. I'm like, that may have been what you really wanted the whole time. And so I always just try to think like, I have clients who say, I want to achieve X, Y, Z. It's like, why? It's like, well, cause I want to set a good example for my kids. And I'm like, cool. Like we have something to strive for. Like this is really what we're pursuing. It's not necessarily to squat 2 plates or whatever the objective goal may be. Those things are great, but it's not everything. And then talking about the whole ego thing. Yeah, I definitely have clients who are curious. Most people don't care about the science of things. And when they do, I have a tendency to waterboard them with information. It's like you're supposed to give them like a sip of water from a fountain and I'm a fire hose,
yeah.
And I have to like dial it back sometimes like, all right, tell me to shut up if I'm saying too much. You're like, no, it's cool. Okay, cool. There's a lot of people that like, they see someone on Instagram, like you're saying earlier, you're talking about AI, like, okay, I got it all figured out. I don't need to trust the expert. Right. And like, that kind of confuses me because I had one person tell me once, they're like, how do I spot reduce belly fat? Like what exercise can we do? I was like, oh, you can't. And I was like, well, I was talking about like a calorie deficit, just like really simple, like nutrition protocols and all that stuff. And then like, sure, if you want to like strengthen the abs at school so that you build the muscle underneath and as you like lean out, you get to see it better. Like I was just trying to explain this. And then she's like, nah. She's like, what you're really supposed to do is, she basically said muscle confusion, but for nutrition. She's like, if you eat a lot of calories one day and then not a lot of calories the next day, your body has to go into overdrive to burn all the calories. And I was just like, you got all the answers, But I just think to myself, it's like, for me, a good client is just, I used to think I need 3 things. from a client for it to work? Can our schedules line up? Do they have the money to pay for the sessions? Unfortunately, training is expensive. Now, I love it. I would do it for free, but I also have bills. Do you know what I mean? That's how that works. And then the third thing is like any interest. But now I think like, can they be a good person and have like some level of effort? So maybe it's like 4 or 5 things. But I think if like, yes, you have the logistical side, but then you're a good person, you like work your ass off. I don't care who you are. And I've experienced this with when I was working with these like D1 bound dudes, and they don't want to hear what you have to say. Sometimes they're just like, dude, let me do my box jumps and throws. There's this one kid, he's a really husky, like 8th grade kid, really nerdy, really shy and all that stuff. But he's the sweetest kid I've ever seen. And I gave him like high incline push-ups because it's his first time ever. And he was like going to failure on these things. You could see like the fire in his eyes. I'm like, fucking love this kid. Like, I want to work with these. If it's D1, if it's pro, if it's your first time ever touching a weight, are you trained to do? Are you sending us most to being on that? So I think that's what shows the most success. And the main reason why I reached out to you guys about this last night was because my last session I had last night was essentially this. A client came in, I've been training her for about 4 to 6 weeks. She started with a 12 kg bell, just on like RDLs and deadlifts, and worked up to 24 kgs, which is for the American audience, which is everybody. I'm like 27 pounds, like 53 pounds. And my heaviest bell is 40 kgs, which is 88 pounds. And I just like wanted to know where her head was at. So I was like, how long do you think it would take to deadlift that heaviest bell? If she said tomorrow, maybe not. If she said a year, maybe not. So maybe a couple months. I think okay, yeah, that seems reasonable. And I was like, are you sticking to this exercise till we achieve that? She's like, yeah, absolutely. I love goals. She's like, my birthday's in early May. I want to be able to lift that by my birthday. I'm like, this is awesome. We have a goal. We're going to train this really hard. And then I was like, do you want to do it for 3 reps? And she's like, make it 5. I'm like, cool. Like, this is a dream client. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to the ones who you tell them something, they reject it immediately, and then they do their own.
Honestly, the more time that's gone on, again, just and personal anecdote, and I don't know whether that's just because I'm deeper into the game now and like I can charge a little bit more. Like I don't know what it is exactly, but I honestly, man, I don't get a lot of like problem type people. Like most of the people that come and seek me out nowadays are like you said, like they will take, they will take my training advice and training wisdom to heart. Sometimes with parents things get like tricky, again more so with just sometimes like on the like trying to explain some of the aches and pains and like rehab type stuff, like that can get a little bit tricky. And then parents just kind of misunderstand, like everything is just like, yeah, they just need to stretch better or stretch more. And like, okay, like it's not a stretching it's not a stretching issue. It's a like they only play one sport year round. but no, I really don't. Even with most of the athletes that I get, man, like they you get to a point where you have helped people achieve success. And again, we going all the way back, circling back to like training yourself. Like people know that I train myself and can still do relatively athletic and cool things like as a 30-year-old. So I think there's some trust that's built with that kind of stuff too. And also again, just like being willing to like surround yourself with like really smart people and defer to them as well. People like Cody.
Cody, can you get us started off on, I appreciate that, by the way, Ben. Cody, can you get us started off on like what you think makes a good physical therapist or a good coach? Because we talked about clients. What's the other end of that equation to have a successful relationship?
I think this isn't the most foremost, but I think it's like the most hot topic to say is I don't know. Let me figure that out. Like
I love it.
humans are already more complex than any car would ever be, regardless of what anybody says. That's just as a physiological walking bag of meat at the end of the day. I hate to bring it down, but then what makes us more than a bag of meat is you put this crazy brain that has billions and trillions of electrical signals going on that impact everything, literally everything. And it's just like my goal is to meet you with where you're at. And if I don't know, like I don't see what's wrong with saying I don't know instead of falsely saying this is how we do it. Right. I did like a year-long fellowship program on chronic pain. It was technically persistent pain science, if we want to be specific with it. And it's like people underestimate the power of the brain. And I think that's becoming more prevalent. That we like, hey, the brain does play a huge impact. We just don't know how much. But it's crazy to think like when you blind a MRI and then they might have the worst back in the world, but you have someone that they respect say, your back's good. You can go do this. And it's like pain will drop from like a 6 to a 1 or 2. And it's like they can go squat versus, no being somebody And it's like, that's the worst back I've ever seen on an MRI. And it's like a 2 millimeter disc herniation. Like, you probably do that when you sneeze on a daily basis and you don't even
Mhm.
realize it. And it's like, they're devastated. And then they walk out of there in more pain, or they actually limp. You know what I mean? And I think that's saying, I don't know, let me figure it out, because the brain complex to like the body, that's hard. No one can do that. Right. And
Mhm.
it's like, we look at data, the most successful people treating chronic pain right now are psychologists, not PTs, not chiros, not massage therapists, not surgeons, not pharmacological impacts. It's a psychologist. They're not touching you, they're just talking to you. They're not injecting you anything, they're not putting hardware in your body. And I think that shows volumes, but because it's not sexy, because it's not cool or expensive, no one's talking about it. And it's like, that psychologist is going to have 8 weeks to dig deep into what fears you might have or what
Mhm.
makes you feel better. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Versus an ortho surgeon sees you for 5 minutes prior to opening up your entire back and putting giant hardware in.
No, the thing that Cody and I talk about, and like, th- I mean, Cody and Derek are actually going to present on it here at the gym. And again, something Q talked about this weekend is like this just over medicalization of everything, and to the point where the kid that we were alluding to earlier with the patellar tendinopathy, like, dude, when he left that doctor's office, I train his girlfriend too. He left that doctor's office, he was in tears.
Sure, of course.
Like, that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
That's, like, so crazy.
Mhm.
So I just think, I think that kind of stuff, I think the psychological component, and how we're speaking to clients, and, obviously with Cody and the other PTs out there with patients, like, I think that's super important, what you
Mhm.
say. And to like, it's across your chest right now, Matt. Like, it's your whole business. Like, empower. Like, we need to be
Mhm.
empowering people to move, empowering people that, like, whatever, like, your MRI or whatever your doctor, like, you're not those things. Like, you're a living, breathing human being that still has a lot of physical capabilities, and there's still so much we can do. We can help you get out of pain. We can help you get stronger. We can help you move better. We can help you with your conditioning. My dad was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes recently. I'm going to do my best to help him reverse this disease,
Mhm.
so he can live, a longer and a healthier life. So, yeah, I think the things we say, and, how we're going about conversations are really important.
I definitely want to speak to that. I want to go back really, really quick to the whole I don't know thing and the value in that. It's really trippy. The two things that you mentioned, Cody, because I made a post about one of them recently, and I just had this conversation last night. The I don't know thing. I'm not going to name names, but there was one time during my internship that another intern was correcting form. And so maybe the push up was like flared out super wide. It's like, just pull your arms in a little bit, try to make the arrow, right? Which I agree with, right? But then the kid asked, he's like, why? Which is an innocent enough question, and it's better to say, "I don't know," like, Clay told me, Clay's the boss, it's like, "Clay told me," and then he's like, "But I can figure out, I can tell you," like, that's actually, like, the best way to respond, and he's like, better rewards." I'm like, "Better rewards? Is this a credit card? Like, what are we what are we talking about?" I'm like, "You gave him, like, no explanation, you just tried to, like, cover your ass, so you seem like the smartest guy in the room." I'm just like, "I don't like that." Like, you can't know everything about everything, and I'm happy to tell people, but then, yeah, to the other side of that, it's not just, "I don't know," and then you never know anything, and what's the point of even being there? I think jujitsu is a good example of this. If someone hits me with a submission, I have no idea what to do in that situation, or a pass or something, and they just keep hitting it over and over and over again, I'm like, "This sucks," and then I do research, and then it makes me more well-rounded, but it's the same thing with having these conversations with clients. If I just BS something, then, like, it's a disservice to them, but ultimately a disservice to me. It makes me worse as a trainer to not then go do the research afterwards and get better. Um, but then you're talking about the power of the mind. My wife is a therapist, and she is getting her certification EMDR, which I don't know if you've, like, heard anything. It's crazy. To me, it sounds like voodoo, but you can help people have, like, so EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and the idea is that, like, your eyes go through movements during sleep, and they basically stimulate that same sort of part of the brain while you're awake through, like, moving your eyes around and all that stuff. And then they can kind of tap into trauma to, like, reduce the sensitivity of your, like, triggers or something like that. So if, like, something would trigger you and you have, like, a huge response, PTSD, for example, they can make that lesser to a significant amount. And almost like people will sometimes be healed and almost not talk at all during a session, which is so crazy, talking about the power of the brain and, like, the rewiring and all that stuff. But also word choice. My dad, for example, I've told this story 1,000 times, had back pain forever. And he's like, I just have a bad back. I have a bad back. And if he did a deadlift on a 40-pound kettlebell, he's like, oh, my back, I feel it. I'm like, cool. Those are your spinal erectors. They're weak. Let's get them strong. That'll fix everything. But I just told him like, okay, well, just make a deal with me. You probably won't get hurt if you do more than a 2 out of 3 out of 10, like sensitivity, right? As long as it's sensitive, but not painful, let's just keep pushing it. And as long as the strain on the muscles is like 7 or 8 out of 10, it's enough that you can get a stimulus and grow over time, but it's not so much that you feel like you're going to snap something. We'll stick with this 40-pound kettlebell until it feels like the 7 out of 10 difficulty has gone down to a 6 out of 10 difficulty. And on any given day, if the flare up feels like it's more than 3 out of 10 discomfort, we won't push it. I was like, let's just stick with those rules and keep going up so long as you're always at a 7 out of 10 difficulty. By the end of the year, he's deadlifting 275 and had no back pain. And it's like just the power of saying, like, yeah, you're talking about empower. It's like, you can't do this. You're not sensitive. Your basketball kid can play basketball again. You know, he didn't have like a Lindsey Vonn injury. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the same thing. It's patellar tendinopathy. And you're telling them you're never going to play basketball again. To me, is just like so disappointing. I've seen that with some of my clients. They went to a physical therapist. They said the whole thing, like, if you sneeze wrong or you move wrong just once, like, you'll have irreparable nerve damage in like your lumbar spine. I'm like, okay, she's terrified of doing anything. And she loves going dancing with friends. She loves golfing and all that stuff. And she's like, you know, she's going to be bubble boy for the rest of her life because of this. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So,
Two things. I've actually been a patient on the other side of EMDR as a N1 subject. I can like attest like anything Eastern or like outside of like tangible stuff. Like I'm very hesitant. I'm not even like, I don't get massages because I don't feel better like the day after. Like I'm just, my mind is so conditioned that way. But like I remember the first time I had some stuff that really freaked me out when I did my cadaver lab. I spent a whole year working on a body, if you will. That mentally like really messed me up and I had no idea where to go. My professor who I can't believe people like him exist because he is so smart. Like to this day, like Dr. Pettigrew, he literally was like, I'm going to make AI, but I need to know how the human brain works. So I'm going to go become a neuro dude, teach neuroanatomy while I develop my AI. So this was a computer guy that went biology to come back to a computer. And he was like one of the pioneers to like some of the stuff. Anyway, he's like, go to counseling. I don't know. So it's like, okay, I did that. And it was crazy. It was like 3 sessions. And it's like, I don't know. I could walk into the cadaver lab and not see my heart rate spike up, like not get a true physiological response. And before that, like I was, I'd have a pizza and we go study for a little bit for like 3 hours on like a Friday night. And it's like, didn't even phase me versus like 4 months prior. Freaked me out. And it's like, I don't know. And there's been other times like I know it worked for me in the past. Maybe it'll work again in the future. So I'm like totally like I'm on it. I love that she's like going about that. I'd be curious to put that in a chronic pain like research lab
sure.
to see if
Sure.
there's anything situated with that. But I want to talk about the chain analogy with where the weak like healthcare and training, all it takes is that weakest link. And once that breaks, lack of a better term, it's fucked because it's so intertwined. So Ben works with like field and sport athletes. They go to the doctor. Ben and the doctor don't talk, and it's not the doctor's fault, but it's like he's so busy, he doesn't have time to check in with every athlete, with everyone else that they're working with. But then they go to the PT in this PT mill where they're just trying to see as many patients as possible, and they're so busy. And it's like, well, they could be fragile. They don't train, right? So they're like, oh, I don't want to increase their patellar tendinopathy pain. When it's like, we know if you're not going into the pain cave a little bit, that 3 to 4 out of 10 pain, especially on a patellar tendon, it's not going to change the structure of the tissue, let alone the time constraint involved in that situation, which could be 12 weeks for a minimum like 10% plastic change in that tendon. And it's like, it is so simple for someone to ruin their life, their quality of life at such a young age, depending. All it takes is for someone to have that weakest chain break and they're screwed. No one should go out of the doctor's office unless something truly tragic is going on where they start to cry. Like, I don't want to sound like insensitive, but it's like, this is a well-documented research situation. And when it's mismanaged by someone that is viewed at the top, and then they refuse to say, I don't know, or put trust into something that's maybe a little bit outside of their realm, that's where mistakes happen. That's where egos and ignorance ruin people's lives. And all it takes is maybe that 16-year-old, or in the chronic pain case, you have a 30-year-old that might have a little bit of sciatic symptoms for the first time. And they're like, you need surgery, your back is destroyed and you can't. I'm like, no, you're 30 years old. you were not in a car accident and you don't have leg weakness and you don't have atrophy of that leg, like you're going to be okay. We just have to give it time because it will heal. But then they go to say me and they're like, well, this ortho, this neuro says it's not going to heal. I am subjected in perception below them. So they're not going to believe anything I say. And that's where I think this like weakest link, maybe it's not the person, maybe it's the system or the lack of communication and collaboration. Boom. I love talking to like you, Matt, you, Ben, like it makes me feel better that there's trainers out there that have and strength and conditioning professionals that have this knowledge now, because it's like people don't realize like you're not saving a life in the moment, but you can be saving a life in the future. Like I was just talking to a cardiologist this weekend on my ski. I just got back from a ski trip, so if my nose is like Rudolph, it's windburn. And I ate shit. But it's like he has such a lack of education on anybody else in healthcare. I don't, they're smart people. They're extremely smart people. Do not get me wrong. But there's a level of ignorance, but there's the complex that like I can't let people know that I'm not educated on this situation. So it's like, stop giving recommendations on shit you don't know. And I say that with my whole heart, and I will fight anybody, and I can fight. Like when it comes down to, I'm joking on that. Like, I'm not going to physically harm someone, but like,
You didn't have to say that, bro. We knew that you're not going to beat anybody up.
some people might, but it's like, just because you came across a famous Instagram profile and you think that you have all the knowledge, that the lack of ignorance or disconnect that could change someone's life for the worse. It can help someone. Don't get me wrong, but it's the system at play that is like failing healthcare, because we have more money, resources than ever, and more people in healthcare than ever, yet disability is skyrocketing, right? Like cardiovascular disease, skyrocketing. That should not be happening. Like it blows my mind that we have data, but like people are just so into their own egos. Again, I fall into that category sometimes as well. Do not get me wrong. I'm fallacies all around, but it's like, if we just talked to one another, and I'm so grateful that like there's good continuing education companies out there. Honestly, I think the first like 2-3 con eds I went to after I was a strength and conditioning professional before PT, but I went and did more strength and conditioning con eds. That severely impacted my practice, like granular. Like it was way more than any like, I'm going to go learn how to do, back manipulations. No, like that's great. But again, it goes back to that conversation. Like I'm not going to tell someone that I'm putting them back into place and that they're good, because it's like, if that was the case, like again, smashing a foam roller on the rib cage, that's not changing the joint. That's relaxing stuff around it temporarily. What if that was the case? Putting a squatting 405 and putting that on your traps, no one would ever have neck pain if that was the like case. Like I'm going on a huge tangent just because it's like, this is what I fight every day. And Ben and I like talk about this stuff all the time. It's like, you can't help but be mad, because it's like, we're just trying to help people. And it's like, there's people above us, quote unquote, in perception, that are just like tearing it apart and breaking that chain. Once the chain's broken, it's a lot harder to go back, weld it, put it like, we need some 5/8 chains from, all the conjugate programs involved there. But anyway,
There's definitely,
it's frustrating, and I think it is. I think it does allude to like a bigger issue with the system in general, which like that's a whole other conversation. Yeah, when you have a kid in your office and you tell them, like to just or an adult, and you tell them like that you can't do deadlifts, or you can't play a sport, or you can't, like, those are just ridiculous things. Like if you, again, when you zoom out, like most of our population isn't even hitting general physical activity guidelines, and you're going to tell people that they shouldn't do certain activities. Like that's ridiculous, and that shouldn't be happening. And then to Cody's point too, with like the egos involved, like, yes, everyone has their egos, and we all have our biases, and like that's like a totally normal thing, and like that's okay. Like that can be a really good thing for human beings. But like something like, shadowing the sessions that like Cody does, even with like my athletes and clients, has been like super cool to see. And also like Cody doing some like strength and conditioning principles with my, clients and athletes that are rehab like there's not a delineation between it. Like I'm not like, well, Cody's the rehab guy and I'm not, like, no, like we talk about like what's going on with the person that is an injury or has some pain going on, Cody gives me some advice on like, hey, like here's how to adjust their program for XYZ. And then Cody will ask me questions about like whatever, like conversations we've had or their history or their like it can be a collaborative thing. We don't have to be so egotistical about it. And like we all want the same things for people. We just want people to get better and be active and hit physical activity guidelines, crush life, do the things that they want to do.
Yeah, I definitely want to speak to that. I think there's the analogy or to the quote that's like a good warm up is you don't know where the warm up stops and the workout starts. But it's the same thing with rehab and strength and conditioning. Is that if you're like, okay, this is my rehab guy and this is my strength guy, and it's like, wow, they're totally different. Then I feel like you're failing the person because you're not meeting that middle area. You're not actually like ramping them up gradually enough over time that they get to a point where it's like, okay, I started and I can only do this. And then I get to this point where I can go and do like, better than ever. If we're talking about the power of the mind, like sometimes I tell people, especially with non-contact injuries, if you got hurt at 100% and a normal physical therapist will clear you at 80%, like you're in a worse spot than when you got injured in the first place. So maybe the goal should be not even just to get to 100%, maybe 120%, 150%, whatever. Get stronger and more resilient than where you were in the first place. But the other thing too is like this whole glass half full analogy. I like the idea of being not like an optimist or a pessimist or an optimistic realist is almost what I want to say. Where it's like you're real about your situation, not lying to yourself, but then you're saying, okay, I do have control, and then you run with it. So an example is like if the glass is 90% empty, it's still 10% full. You're aware of how much is in the glass. You're not lying to yourself about how much is in the glass, but you're still focusing on that 10% you can do. And you're like a dog with a bone with it. You go crazy on that. And then that helps make it better. When I snapped my MCL, I told the story, several times on the podcast and to Cody before the podcast. There's a 3-month injury to heal. I healed it in 2 months because I just kept thinking about what can I do? Okay. Like I said, to the bike, the bottom rotation, I was doing flexion, I was doing extension, I was doing like leg extensions until they got to the same strength between them. And I saw week to week, I could add 5 pounds and all that stuff. That was huge. And then just like same thing, the mental and emotional power of training everything that was healthy, also huge for like the mental health thing. Cause when I was in high school, it was my senior year. I like had a couple offers for D3 schools. I was going to go play in some like ID camps or whatever. And then like I had some schools that said they'd come out and watch me and give me a bigger pool to select from and all that stuff. And I got injured and I was out for 6 months. Lack of better words is like really shit turf toe, just like broke a bone and like tore like cartilage and all that stuff, whatever. It was on my kicking foot, exactly where I kicked the ball every time. And it was affecting my sprinting too, because I couldn't, extend or like, I guess dorsiflex or whatever. But anyway, so like I was so mopey about it that it took me like I went down to like this deep pit. I was like, oh, my aspirations to play in college and maybe even professional had cooked. And I was like so mopey for a month or two. And then I had some friends that helped me out. They took me to the gym. And this is how I got into strength and conditioning in the first place. I would just rip bench drop sets. And I know it's not the smartest thing in the world, right? It's the most high school thing in the world to do. We just slap on as many tens as we could, rip as many as we can, take off a 10, rip as many as we could. And that'd be like our workout. But I was like, you know what?
Got
That
like 25 tens. Yeah, like 25 tens
yeah,
on each
and it
side.
messes with everybody in the gym.
We've
That
all
makes
done it, bro. It's
yeah.
sick. It's so
But
sick.
but then the other thing too is like that helped me get through it when doing nothing and feeling sorry for myself. Like a doctor could have said, "You're never going to play again." What would that have done to me? Especially for something so stupid and treatable like that. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, we definitely went through the rants and all that stuff. I want to respect your guys' time. Cody, if you want to plug yourself before signing off and give one final piece of advice, I'd like for you to do that. And then Ben, same for you.
You can find me on Instagram mainly, Cody Prescription Strength. That's pretty much my primary place. At the end of the day, biggest thing is like you do have the power to do whatever you want to do as far as this physical rehab and strength and conditioning. You just have to believe it and you have to give it time. Just focus on what you can do, like we were just talking about.
Ben, what about you?
At Ben Racke, I think on pretty much all social platforms. If you Google my name, you'll find me. You'll find me. You'll find the gym. One piece of advice: aim to hit physical activity guidelines. 150 minutes a week of aerobic activity, at least 2 days a week of full body or every major muscle group strength training. And Pilates is not a strength stimulus. Not that it's bad. It's good exercise. Anything that you want to do is good exercise. Anything you want to find to do is good exercise, but that's not strength training.
And then should everybody run?
Hey man, yeah, if you want to run, you can run. Not maybe the best starting point for everyone on the planet. And a lot of people in my experience don't have any desire to be a runner. So, but you still still need to get your conditioning in. So but there's lots of tools, lots of ways to get it done.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate it. This was a blast. And yeah, I hope to have you guys both back on the podcast again so we can rip. I mean, we got through an hour and a half, and I'm sure there's still a lot of subjects you could have touched. So yeah, I just want to thank you for your guys' time.
Of course,
Thanks,
man.
man.
Anytime. Thank you.
Cool. See ya.